make sure I have some room for y'all. So, before we get started, you need to understand that a lot of people don't seem to really have done the research as to where all of this value really starts. And so as we look behind on the board, you're going to see that it's all about the setup, all right? Because remember, we've had collapses in the past, and we've had emergencies of economic divergences or economic, what we call that, upgrades, right? In order to sustain this, the flow of money in our economy globally. So what we have to understand is that there are all these different things going on, and I really want to get to the root of how we started getting to this point, because if you haven't paid attention, it all started back in 1913 when the Federal Reserve was created. Now, when the Federal Reserve was created, what this led to was the new kind of acknowledgement of what Jekyll Island stood for. I like to start here because it also connects to the truth of human origins, and I'll explain on that in a bit. But number one is that it gave birth to this new structure of what would become the world's superpower in an economic position by giving the U.S. the ability in a what was later to be discovered, a plan to give total control of the printing ability of money to the United States, aka the Federal Reserve, by being able to slowly transition out of the gold reserve, or the gold standard, I'm sorry. And so when the US was able to break away from the gold standard, we were able to then start printing money at a ridiculous rate, because debt became the new standard, credit became the new standard, after we once again took ownership of what was the oil, the energy source for the current world technology to be able to operate on. So there's these multiple layers of where we were and where we're going. And if you don't really understand that it all starts with the transition of the old world into the new world, into what we would say the Federal Reserve, by creating a form of global monetary currency that is basically pegging the US dollar, which is the currency of the United States, regardless of how many currency units there were created at the time. Now there is a massive volume and increase, right, over the last 5 years of printing out so much money that the U.S. is now a little out of control. And we understand this because we're all kind of having this perception of an economic collapse due to the current status of the supply, the shipping supply. And so what we need to understand is how all of this really happened and why it's going on, because it seems like there's this big misunderstanding of what really set it off. And the truth was that it was set off by Australia when in 2020, April of 2020, they questioned what was being done with the whole China situation, right? So Australia, who was China's main coal importer or exporter, they were doing deals between China and Australia to trade coal and to purchase coal. And so basically what happened is that China was upset because Australian Prime Minister questioned the legitimacy of the situation and the investigation and how deep they were going into things. So basically China said, we're going to go ahead and screw you guys by saying we're not going to do trades with you to do coal anymore. But obviously China relied 60% of its energy needs come from coal. So if China doesn't have coal, China can't produce energy. So if China can't produce energy, China will have blackouts. If China has blackouts, world production rate goes down because China is the world's factory. And so if you're understanding what's going on, it all derives from the main root of the demand for coal. And this deal between China and Australia, but then you also got to look deeper, because China is, I'm sure, very aware that the United States and Australia have created a deal back in 2009 that Australia is now a corporation, an incorporated business of the United States of America. However, it is not traded on the stock exchange, but it is protected by the same rules and investment guidelines in the SEC as any other company. Now remember, if Australia is having the opportunity to produce, but then it gets into this debate with China and they're trying to figure out who takes ownership, this could bring that old deal into play, causing a severe issue around the world. But more importantly, we got to look at the energy needs, right? The energy needs right now are all being fought because of the human rights. This is why the Austrian Prime Minister stood up, because he was not agreeing with the way China is handling their human rights policies. And they're not wrong in that, but it's all about human rights. And you have to remember that there's two ways that can go about it. With our current education and our current technological advances, we can be talking about human rights on Earth or off Earth. And this is important because most people don't pay attention to what's going on outside of the world and these interstellar corporations that are being involved with the trade and the development of cosmic or intergalactic marketplaces. And so you got to realize that humans are actually being leveraged across these galaxies, literally space trade, and there has to be some kind of regulation. But more importantly, the mining is also being done in other parts of the universe. And so you got to really put yourself in a position to realize that this whole illusion has been meant to deceive you on where humans come from, our role in the entire universe, in order to monetize or capitalize on your human energy, because your energy could be leveraged to mine. And if it's being leveraged to mine, it can be profited by being able to establish a stock market behind that mining, or the allocation of resources, or the process of moving resources around, and the businesses that participate in that is called the stock market. And so when you start to pay attention and you realize that there is this whole idea of capitalizing or profiting on what it is, the flow of energy in the entire world, because of participation of minds like yours and mine, we're all getting involved in this flow of energy. And if you don't realize that this is what it's all about, and you don't enter that flow of energy, then what's going to happen is you will never be able to go ahead and leverage that flow of energy to exit the matrix, because you're always participating it from a consumer aspect, not a producer or an architect or an overseer. And so this is where a lot of people just get their ass confused, because they're trying to act so hard like they're the shit inside the race, but you got to look at it from outside the race, because if you don't look at it from above, you can't really see what's going on. And to understand what's going on, you have to have an awareness of what different displays of movement or graphs could you possibly look at to give you an idea of these cycles of human emotion and immediate resource allocation, so that you can anticipate the market, so that you could best position yourself in those points, or to be able to move your resources from one asset to the other while being able to maximize the profits. All right, now this is just about saving your energy for the long term, because when we say maximize your profits, it means that you moved your energy from a place that you saw, or your value, you move it from a place that you see is going to slowly collapse. You move it and allocate it to a place that you know is going to be a little bit more stable, or it's going to rise in value. That's all this is. It's being aware of where you place your value, so that you can anticipate future human emotions and reactions to current world events. That's all this is. And if you try to get behind human psychology, you will slowly understand that it's very easy to get a hold of what's coming. And so now that we enter the psychology of humans through the tracking of analytical data through shipping supplies in these different indexes, I'm going to present it to you in a second, you'll be able to start creating more of a direction of our awareness for your own self, so that way you're not being manipulated by others, but you can start looking at specific graphs yourself to then, according to your own level of understanding, decipher what these graphs are saying. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is how you read the charts and how you chase that information that's going to give you the best awareness of where the market in which you currently hold your wealth or allocated value is going to go. Because if the current place where you hold your value, let's say that you're holding it in the stock market, it's going to go up, well, sure, keep it there. But if you know that there's another place where it's going up faster, sure, you have an option. If it's easy to exit your position and transition your value. And that's what this is all about. There is going to be a massive transition of value or wealth, because two things are happening. we have technology stocks going crazy, and we have crypto going crazy. And we also see that the real estate is going crazy, right? So the third thing there. Now, which one is the illusion? Which one is the reality? Which one is it the one that you should get involved with? Now, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm not telling you anything. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing from what I'm learning by what I'm studying. So let's take a look at the board and see what we could do. Now, you got to see it as this whole idea of they're trying to cause this problem reaction solution, right? Hegelian dialectic. So we got to look at the pandemic being the cause for the China trade war with Australia over coal. And then all that really means is that they're trying to push for reserve currency dominance, right? Okay, so we are at a point of reserve currency dominance, and we are also at a point of what is transitioning value across multiple planes without losing as much capital wealth as possible, right? And so because of all of this, we have to understand that we have gone from a place where, yeah, there was a gold standard off gold, back to gold. And so we're still kind of undergoing this way, right? And so because of that, what we have now is called SDRs, and we have crypto. Okay, great. Previous SDR was currency units or currency basket, right? Because there was a specific amount of currencies or specific types of countries' currencies that were being chosen to be as the main world currency so that they can be created as a world bank in order to get the world out of debt back after the 2008 situation. So because this happened, now we have what's called SDRs created by what's called the WEF and the IMF. So we have this current situation of handling money around the world, but now it's coming across this current innovation of technology. So this is tech, and this is going to be able to move value around the world. Now what's happening here is that because this is going on, we have to find a way to incorporate the old system plus the new system, which is being called by technocrats as the New World Order. Now, this is what most people define as the NWO, which is the idea that the old form of money has gotten together with the current brainiacs or engineers of technology so that way they can create what's called global trade or globalization of global trade, right? Or, making the global trade run smoother, let's say. And so first we have to look at what was created because of the Federal Reserve. That was when the Rothschilds, the family that is the wealthiest in the world, and all these other private bloodlines, they created this thing called governments, which run under, or basically individuals that they choose to operate the countries, right? Or in this case, to be able to manipulate where direction of world events go. These governments, they were operating under oil because the current tech, its worldwide tech, was running on oil. Right? We didn't have anybody wealthy enough or blessed enough or lucky enough, just like Tesla, to be able to go ahead and implement this technology worldwide. It was actually pushed down and hidden for many, many years because they could not control what is called global expansion or wealth profiting from that model of energy distribution. Because remember, this has been a plan that has been developed for many, many years. And you have to see it as a generational plan that has been done across many centuries, and those who understand the plan are very smart. So what we're trying to do is reverse engineer what's going on to understand that the Rothschilds in 1913, when they created the Federal Reserve at Jekyll Island, they were implementing a structure of the oil running the world, right? Oil over the world. And then what happened when the IMF came around in the 1970s, when they tried to break away from the gold reserve or the gold standard, is that they were trying to go ahead and create a world of debt, taking advantage of all the resources, right, by putting each country into quote-unquote debt having it all go underneath what's called the SDRs in order to control the network, the resources, and politics. Hence, where we are right now. This is why there is a 2030 agenda of you will own nothing and you will be happy. Because they're trying to control all the resources, the politics, in order to implement technology to control your health and the borders. All right, so remember, as we move on to this new world, we are seeing how technocrats, individuals with opinions about political directions and control over technological companies and protocols and emotions, because they are controlling what you do and when you do it, how you do it, and what you see when you're doing it. These individuals are now creating what is called a COVID pass because of the quote-unquote pandemic. So now what we see is that this COVID pass is going to control how the world moves across borders, and those who can and those who cannot. And so as we see this, remember, this is all to control the ability for you to decide what happens with your own body, your own thoughts, your own reality, your digital space, and what you do in the metaverse, so you can never really get away. You're always under their control, because what they want is to control your body and turn it into a battery. Because once again, a battery for energy that's more efficient and has less pollution, right? Because pollution is expressing carbon or waste. And so humans are destroying the planet by these two things, right? We have pollution and in the sense of carbon and waste. The current situation, the current paradigm of humanity is one that's leading us to have a very destructive environment in which we cause a lot of pollution, carbon, and waste. So therefore, the controlling of the human rights is not as important as protecting the planet. And so you got to see it as, it doesn't matter what, they're going to try to control it, because these resources are what's important. Whether it's the minerals, whether it's the gold, whether it's the metals, whether it's the people, it doesn't matter. And so it all started by breaking apart what is called your health, by breaking down everything from the law. All right, back in the day, they changed the law, and unless you kept up with the law and kept up with the etymology of the language and kept up by increasing your net worth. Remember, if your parents did not come into wealth or did not create their own wealth, they don't have a wealthy network, which means that you don't have the same opportunities as others, meaning you don't have the same allocation of resources, of opportunities, which means your future is just a little bit tighter than theirs. And that's the defining line of, once again, those that have and have not. And so this is where we start looking at the entire infrastructure, right? Because this is regulations that were imposed way back in the day, because they control the law and the language that define who has and who doesn't. And that gives birth to this new technology, which gets to say who gets to do what and who doesn't. And so the more that we talk about this whole transition of how money has really controlled human energy, then we get to look at what's coming, right? Because we understand that there's a debt tsunami that's coming, but we actually have an also actual tsunami that's coming, right? We understand that we see La Palma being plotted on. La Palma, and then we have the Evergreen and BlackRock. Right? So we have these two and this one. And so one is America, US, which owns more than the worldwide resources, more than anybody else. And this is China. And so when these two suffer, what's going to happen is it's going to take down everything. But the idea is that they're trying to capitalize on this being able to remove any record of it ever happening. Because remember, if this thing were to actually happen, this is going to cause a flooding of New York, all the offices, where all the records of all the ownership of all the items that are ever in the stock market. You have to understand the severity of this. If this happens, then this subsequently disappears, because all of a sudden the records are gone. So any trail of all of this ever happening is now gone as we transition into a brand new world being ran on crypto. Where did I put crypto? It's over here. And so you have to see it as, okay, there is a plan, there's an agenda, there's a current generational plan or scheme that's been going on, which is why these technocrats are taking advantage of the time to release their current transition into the metaverse. Because if you're not paying attention, what's going to happen here is all that's going on here is driving the world into the metaverse, because people are trying to get away from the real world because they don't understand the real world. And so this is all a setup, because once again, if you understand that Evergreen is currently manipulating its current rating along with other companies in China, because a lot of companies, 82% of the companies in China have defaulted because China is 270% over their GDP and debt. You know what I'm saying? So because they are so far in debt, they're now going to try to go ahead and leverage this entire situation to decapitalize of all their US dollars to go into America to try to purchase as much as possible. So what we have to do is start seeing this from a global perspective so that you can position yourself correctly. And if you really want to be a little bit more aware of what's going on, it's not just me telling you, oh, something bad's going to happen. No, I'm not telling you something bad's going to happen so you worry. I'm telling you so that you can position yourself and allocate your wealth or your value into a position that makes sense to you if you care or you think that my perspective is worthy of continuing to listen. That's all this is, because you see, I've spent my time trying to figure out how to move my wealth around, and so far, here's what I've come up with. I have 10 different items that I look at, 10 different lists that I want to look at, right? Because if the interest rate of the Federal Reserve is dropping, this means that they're trying to stimulate people to borrow, right? Because they feel like, okay, right now we've been printing so much money, we can allocate to anybody who wants to borrow, but you must be credit worthy, right? So if you're not credit worthy, you cannot get it. Then you have to look at the IMF SDR allocation so you can understand where is the wealth going to be distributed next at a global scale, so you can understand future development projects, where they're going to occur. Because if you don't, how do you prepare for that, right? Because if you know that there's a project going on in Denmark that's going to take off, then you can start doing the research, because it could be a crypto project in Denmark. Then you can go ahead and figure out what information, what market to enter, and at what price you can enter. Because then being able to understand the country's energy needs is going to give you a better awareness of which country can produce without being able to have to suffer. Because if you don't know which country needs a lot of energy, and if they have the substantial amount of coal or uranium or electrical wind generated power through hydro or wind, all these things matter. And so if a country has needs but it doesn't have the ability to produce, is it really going to be sustainable for long term? And then you start looking at the CPI to understand, okay, how is the CPI affecting the people in my country versus people in other areas? Because remember, this is going to determine where people are putting their money at regarding their main basket of consumer goods. Consumer Price Index over the years tells you where the people are putting their money for their survival before their investments. And this is key, because in case this is going up or down, right, it'll tell you how the US gold index is going to be happening. Because if people are taking out their money from the banks and putting it into gold, aka the price of gold goes up, then now you know that people are trusting other sources other than the dollar for support or for long-term stability in their value or wealth. And so now what you're going to look at is these other aspects of things, so that way you can get ahead, because understanding where to move your money is really going to give you a better opportunity to survive in the markets. Because right now, through the greatest transition of wealth, there's a lot of stuff going on. My best effort is to keep you updated. I'm waking up early, doing my research, getting my workouts, trying to help as many people as possible, while still trying to get across a little bit of information to you, so that you can understand how all of these things are actually trying to drive crowds in a specific direction. Remember, they're showing you that the market right now, the stock market, is going up because they don't want you to miss out on what's called this financial opportunity of a lifetime. But remember, when there's a certain volume of people entering this space, certain things are going to happen that are going to cause the space to turn, so that people have to flee to another market where they themselves have already positioned themselves. So this flooding of the market will actually make them insane gains as they continue to move these gains into future predicted markets of importance. And so, how do you know where you want to take a look at? You go ahead and start looking at these different indexes and different relationships between assets or correlations between psychology of individuals and their actions and the projection of where they're going to go by being able to see the cash flow. And so I know sometimes it's complicated, but you will become very passionate about it if you care about taking your family out of its current paradigm. And that's all I'm here to do. I want to make sure that people can transition from a sensation or a perception of doubt in the financial space and move towards a place of like, yo, at least I made some money. I'm not telling you you're going to become rich, but I'm telling you you're going to be able to protect your wealth better than if you didn't give attention to what financial education is all about. And financial education is really all about you being able to know how to move your money from your wallet into a place of, marketplaces with potential growth. In this case, our current day and age requires you to either enter a digital market or a physical market. This could be metals, it could be watches, it could be cars, it could be land, it could be guns, it could be whatever you want it to be in the sense of collectibles and antiques and all that stuff. Or you could enter the digital space, which it could be stocks, it could be crypto, it could be whatever you want, NFTs, anything you want, right? So you have to make a decision on where your hard-earned money goes. It could be here, it could be here, but you better pay attention to the relationships that are happening across time between these assets, people's emotions, and the markets. Because this will allow you to be in a better position to not feel like you're being taken advantage of, but you'll feel in complete ownership and control of your future. And that's all that matters, guys. Make sure you do whatever it takes for you to be about your life today. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a blessed day.